And before I introduce our speakers for today, I want to show a short video.
Every movement, every note, and every story on this stage carries a deeper purpose. It's more than just a performance. It's a mission. That through dance and music, we bring our inner spiritual world into the physical world. A mission to bring the beauty of the divine to life on stage. We believe that all humans came from heaven, no matter your race, culture, or religion, and that we all desire to return home. Introduced in China, a very powerful ancient Buddhist practice was made public. By 1999, 70 to 100 million people in China alone practice Falun Dafa, experiencing profound mental and physical benefits. For 7 years, this practice brought peace and harmony to countless lives. Something changed. Alarmed by the sheer number of practitioners and their faith in something beyond communism, the Chinese Communist Party launched a brutal persecution. Meditation turned into survival, and compassion was met with cruelty. Out of this darkness, a light emerged. In 2006, Falun Dafa practitioners founded Shen Yun Performing Arts in New York. Their goal was to revive 5,000 years of traditional Chinese culture rooted in divine inspiration. Shen Yun became more than a performance. It became a bridge, a way to show the world the true beauty of Chinese culture, free from the shadow of communism. Each dance, each story is a testament to faith, resilience, triumph of the human spirit. To sustain this mission, Petition Academy of the Arts and Petition College were established, training the next generation of artists in classical Chinese dance and music. These students not only perfect their craft, but also refine themselves to values of truth, compassion, and resilience. This is more than education. It's a sanctuary for growth, free from the distractions of modern challenges like social media. It's where discipline and passion come together to nurture extraordinary talent. Despite seemingly insurmountable obstacles, like a massive persecution against Falun Dafa in China, virtually no resources to start a performance company, and no financial support from any government or large corporation, Shen Yun has grown from 1 to 8 troupes, performing over 700 shows a year. This global movement is proof that even in the face of oppression, the human spirit can soar. Our mission isn't just to entertain, it's to inspire, to remind us of the divine within us all. Shen Yun is a call to rediscover our humanity, to reflect on our values, and to strive for a better world. This is why we do what we do.
So today's event, we're going to have a bit of a mixture of different things, kind of like a Shen Yun performance. You have legends from ancient China in the show, you have ethnic and folk dances, you have humor, and you have persecution in China and courage of the resistance. So about Shen Yun, we're going to be talking about the artistry and the talent, as well as things like death threats and persecution. So you've seen the billboards, I'm sure. They're seemingly everywhere. And tonight is opening night here at Lincoln Center. Actually, I haven't been here in about 12 years since we performed here. We've been here every year for a while now. And it's always a great moment in Shen Yun's tour. Lincoln Center, Kennedy Center. We had a bit of a story at Kennedy Center. We can get to that in a little bit. Shen Yun has been in the news quite a bit lately. There's bomb threats, lawsuits, allegations, spies, but largely missing from the media coverage is one thing, and that's our voices, the voices of the performers. What actually drives them? What makes them do what they do? And so here today we have what is really a first of its kind, unprecedented in this type of forum, where we bring out the dancers. We have, to my right, we have Kay Rubacek, who's the mother of Lee Rubacek, who is a college student performing with Shen Yun on practicum. To his right is Allison Chen, a former Shen Yun dancer, and she can tell you more about her career right now. To her right is one of our stars, principal dancer Peter Huang. To his right is musician Rachel Chen. And to her right is Levi Browdy from the Falun Dafa Information Center. And they will speak a little bit about their personal experience and their specific angle. Also available for interview today, we have Jared Manson, who's actually going to be emceeing the performance tonight. You just saw him a moment ago. And we have Nara Us from Japan, who's also a principal dancer. She's the poster girl. That's her right there. And we have Rachel Lee. Where are you, Rachel? There she is. Horn player from Korea. So first let's start with what is happening. So there's going to be a few points to hear that are going to repeat from the video. So you'll have to follow along with that. And the main thing I want to start with the beginning of Shen Yun, 2006 in New York. Now, I was there when we first started, tried out for the company in the summer of 2006. We didn't even have a theater back then. We had a rehearsal / performance / tryout in the open air with a makeshift curtain that was a clothesline. The orchestra was not in the pit, it was over to the right. And in Dragon Springs, where we're based, a couple hours from here, we have a beautiful Tang Dynasty performance. And that December we started touring. And in the 18 years since then, I've noticed a thing that is following us all along, and that is the Chinese Communist Party's attempts to sabotage us. Now, initially this was mostly in the form of sending performing arts companies to try to compete with us. We would be in one place and they'd perform across the street. We would change our dates and they would change their dates. And then we started getting copies of letters that Chinese embassies and consulates would send to theaters and to local officials in the U.S. and around the world, asking them with thinly veiled threats to cancel the performance in the sake of U.S.-China relations and sister city relations and performing arts companies from China being able to come to that city. When that didn't work to stop us, we saw them try to smear our reputation in the media. Online commentators, the 50-cent army, inserts in the Wall Street Journal and London Guardian and the Australian, multiple other newspapers, the China Watch, if you remember that, with articles attacking Shen Yun. Hacking our ticket site, tire slashing, breaking into a choreographer's house and stealing only his laptop and not the jewelry, and spying. We'll talk about a few of these in a moment. But something has changed the last year or so. An escalation that is very different in nature from what we saw before. In fact, the last few years before the recent development, it seemed like the ambassadors and consul generals were just kind of going through the motions. Like they didn't get the memo that they don't need to send these letters anymore. They say, oh, here's our boilerplate about Shen Yun coming to the city. And we'd go to theaters and they say, oh yeah, we get their letters every year. But the dramatic escalation is a multi-pronged attack. And we first learned about this about a year ago, even longer now, when we got leaked documents from China, from the Ministry of State Security and Ministry of Public Security, and Levi Browdy here can talk about that in a moment. And they spoke of a well-coordinated and extensive effort to completely destroy Shen Yun and the broader Falun Gong community in the United States. A sort of endgame scenario. Specifically, they talked about weaponizing social media and the American press against us, using lawfare and inciting government investigations, and ultimately trying to sow discord between Falun Gong practitioners and the American public, to try to pit this community of Americans and an American company against the U.S. government. And this was before the New York Times, before any of the lawsuits. We already knew about this. And so indeed over the last year we've seen CCP-backed Chinese media social influencers exclusively focusing on attacking Shen Yun one episode at a time, hours and hours and hours. We've seen American English-speaking Caucasian YouTubers being offered money to do videos attacking Shen Yun. One of them came on the record lately, and we heard about this before as well. We've seen frivolous lawsuits against Shen Yun, against our headquarters. We've seen large-scale attacks in a campaign by the New York Times with no less than 10 articles attacking Shen Yun. And we've seen horrifying bomb threats, death threats, rape threats, 36 of them. I just got one more this morning from Cheyenne, Wyoming. A total of 41 if you include the end of last tour. So of course the question is, why? Why is the CCP so afraid of Shen Yun? Why is the CCP targeting us? A performing arts company that does classical Chinese dance and music and tells stories. Clearly the CCP is afraid. But to understand why it's happening and what they're afraid of, I need to go back a little bit to some of the things Jared was talking about here with the origin story of Falun Gong and Shen Yun. So let's not go back 5,000 years right now. You can watch the show tonight if you want to do that. Let's just go back to 1992. This is the end of the Qigong boom. A period of the 70s and 80s in particular in China where you had millions of people across China, over 100 million were estimated, at dawn doing Tai Chi or Qigong exercises. And there was a lot of money, a lot of fraud involved, a lot of issues were coming up socially. And in 1992, Falun Gong is introduced to the public by Mr. Li Hongzhi. And he says, this is actually what Qigong is for. It's for elevating yourself spiritually and morally. And I'm going to teach this practice and it's going to be free. And it's always going to be free. It's got 5 exercises. The principles are truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. And after a couple of years of giving lectures across the country, the popular practice reached maybe 70 to 100 million people, according to Chinese government estimates from late 90s. So in 1999, Jiang Zemin, chairman of the Communist Party at the time, says this is too many people, more people than we have members of the Communist Party, and bans Falun Gong. This is a story I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, so we won't get into the details, but basically overnight you have a massive propaganda blitz. Up to 100 million people are turned into enemies of the state. Some of them are party members, some of them are high-ranking officials, some of them are artists. And they are arrested, they're sent to labor camps, their family members then go to petition for the release of their parents or their siblings or their children, and they're rounded up and sent to labor camps too. They're tortured, they're killed, and later on we find out that they're being killed for their organs in a massive atrocity that some people are calling the crime of the century, that is still little known publicly, but is very well documented at this point. So outside of China, what do Falun Gong practitioners do? Well, these are people who were interested in the practice because they wanted something spiritual, a yoga plus, a Tai Chi plus. They wanted something more. They weren't looking for political campaigning. They weren't activists, right? That's not what we were. But now people like them in China, a lot of them here are in the diaspora, are ethnic Chinese who came here to study, people with high education, advanced degrees, successful people. They say, well, what can we do to stop the persecution in China? And so that's when you see the parades and the torture exhibits and the flyers and people pounding the pavement in Washington and trying to get the media interested, because the Western media didn't know what to do with this. In fact, if you look at the coverage of the persecution from the early period 25 years ago, all the way to 2001, 2002, you see a lot of parroting of Chinese Communist Party propaganda. And then the media just went silent around 2002, 2003. And it's around that time that some of the Falun Gong practitioners in the US, in Canada, in Australia, who were artists, some of them top artists from China, choreographers, composers, musicians, and dancers. They said, what can we do with our skills to talk about what's happening in China? Let's do a little performance. And they started with a Chinese New Year performance. And part of that was because the Chinese embassy would put on a production every year, and they said, well, this doesn't represent us. This is red from top to bottom. It's all about how great things are in China and the CCP and how grateful they are to Mao and everybody else. Let's put on something that actually represents traditional Chinese culture, and at the same time, let's talk about what is happening to Falun Gong practitioners there. And I was part of one of those productions back in 2004 and 2005, and then finally they said, let's do this for real. Let's form a company, and let's start Shen Yun Performing Arts. And that was in 2006. So why is the CCP so afraid? Getting back to that question. So I would break it down into two main reasons, though you could write a whole book about this. The first one would be the Falun Gong connection. The CCP has tried to stop anything Falun Gong related outside of China. It could be an art exhibit, it could be a concert, it could be an event at a school. We experienced cancel culture 20-something years before everybody else. And not only that, in the performance here at Lincoln Center, where tonight there will be VIPs from all walks of life, we show what is happening in China on stage in a moving and memorable way. Peter plays one of those roles. There's something about art that is very, very powerful, that it's storytelling in a very direct form. And this is a persecution the CCP has spent all these resources for a quarter of a century saying it does not exist. And here we are performing it at the Kennedy Center, at the Lincoln Center, and everywhere else. Not only that, the performers are Falun Gong practitioners, which the CCP has wanted to brand in all its negative light. And here you see them happy and joyful and talented. And that really dismantles their narrative. So that's the first reason. Second reason, if you see our billboards, it says right there, China before communism. That is what Shen Yun shows on stage. 5,000 years of civilization, what it was like before Mao, before the Cultural Revolution, before it was almost entirely wiped out. And Shen Yun is reviving that. And when you revive it and you have people in the West saying, oh, I found the real China here. This is the China that I grew up admiring. And when Chinese people say, this reminds me of the stories my grandmother used to tell me when I was a kid, they start to question, perhaps, why they have this Soviet import running the country that has killed 60 to 80 million people. By seeing China before communism, and I don't know that this is necessarily what the choreographers and composers and all of us set out to do when we first started, but by showing China before communism, you can imagine a China without communism. The CCP is terrified of that. So what have we... You heard that 2 weeks ago at the Kennedy Center we were evacuated in the middle of setup, 3 hours outside in freezing temperature. Last year, let's start with this one. There are two PRC nationals by the name of John Chen and Lin Feng living in the U.S. who were arrested in a sting operation by the FBI, pleaded guilty and sentenced for acting as agents of the CCP. They had tried to bribe an undercover FBI agent who was posing as an IRS official in an attempt to revoke Shen Yun's nonprofit status and tax exemption. They admitted to working directly under a PRC official. And they were also connected to lawsuits targeting our headquarters that have since been dismissed as frivolous, dismissed with prejudice it's called, which means you can't file them again, you can't keep filing them over and over again, for environmental issues. And the bomb threats, that's perhaps the most shocking, that a performing arts company in America would face bomb threats. Our audience members would face bomb threats, the staff. Just the last 2 weeks, we've gotten them in Birmingham, Alabama, Huntsville, Alabama, St. Louis, Des Moines, Syracuse, Cheyenne, San Lorenzo, Spain, Geelong and Taichung in Taiwan. 32 of them, this tour alone, just under 3 months, 5 more at the end of last tour. I'll give you a couple of examples. This is from St. Louis, March 13th, Stifel Theater. And it reads, this is an email that was sent to the theater. Actually, this one was posted on their ticketing site. Multiple plastic bombs have been placed everywhere. All future performances of Shen Yun will be canceled immediately. All cooperation with Shen Yun must be stopped. A statement must be issued. If we do not see the statement within 12 hours, we will detonate the bomb. One that we received February 7th on our website, the Shen website. I swear to God, we will kidnap and kill Falun Gong supporters in the U.S. Congress in the near future, and then dump their bodies on the streets of Washington, D.C., the Statue of Liberty, or around the White House. We've also had bomb threats targeting President Trump for supporting State Department, Congress, and multiple entities in Taiwan. Also, not just Shen Yun, but the Falun Dafa Information Center receives sometimes daily threats. Dragon Springs as well. Chinese New Year, we're going to kill the guards, we're going to rape the women, on and on and on and on. I won't dignify by reading more. I read one of these in D.C. and I kind of broke down, so I'll stop reading that. Interestingly, we can't say that the CCP is the one that sent them. It just falls in line with everything else that they've been doing and the escalation of the campaign. But what's interesting is they've never denied it. It's all over the media that the CCP is related to this. They've never denied it. They never condemned it. They don't dare to even condemn terrorism. Now, as you know, as professionals better than I do in this field, journalism doesn't operate in a vacuum. What the journalists do has real consequences. Let me show a graph here. This is a graph of the death threats targeting Shen Yun, Falun Gong, and supporters by month. It starts from March of last year to March of this year. Did not exist before March of last year. It started in March after we knew about the new CCP campaign. You have a few, some zeros, 2, 3, 3, 1, 0. Then beginning of this tour, 9. January, 17. February, 34. March, 22. It's not even updated. So at least 25. What changed during that time? Other than the campaign, the only other thing that changed is the New York Times. The New York Times articles attacking Shen Yun started in August. We have at least correlation here. In fact, we have more than correlation in some cases. Let me read you a bomb threat that we received on our website, Shen Yun website, 2 days after the New York Times mega hit piece against Shen Yun. And I call it a hit piece because they did not include our voices. They included claims that we already told them were false, and they had a specific narrative that they went for. Okay, here's the bomb threat we received. Immediately stop slandering, spreading rumors, and groundless accusation against the New York Times. Delete all negative articles. We had press statements at the time about the New York Times. And publicly apologize to the New York Times. If these articles are not deleted within a month, the slanderous attacks are stopped, and publicly apologize to the New York Times, then inexplicable accidents are likely to happen to Shen Yun members, to Faith Academy staff and students' families. Their residences may catch fire for no apparent reason, or they may be attacked by New York gang members. We hope you will take responsibility for them and their families too. I put up a security camera. The New York Times has spent more time and ink investigating Shen Yun's backstage and behind-the-scenes stories than it ever did into a quarter century of torture and murder and organ harvesting in China. While the Wall Street Journal got a Pulitzer Prize for its reporting in the beginning of the persecution, the New York Times completely disappeared. Imagine if they used these resources to cover the human toll on millions of people in China. With a few exceptions, hopefully less in the future, or less exceptions, that's more, however you want to put that. With a few exceptions and hopefully less exceptions, the media seems to be missing the story. Now, I'm going to point out three things, but there are many, many more if you wanted to analyze this. The first is the context and the urgency of why these performers, the dancers, the musicians, the MCs, all of us, why we do what we do. That's the part of the story that's being missed. We have performers who have family being persecuted in China. We have performers who have lost parents to persecution in China. All our performers are blacklisted. We have performers who could not go see their parent for a last time, missed their kids' weddings. And the reality of what's happening in China today is something that, as Falun Gong practitioners, we are very much up to speed on. We read the daily reports coming out of China. And it's very much in our minds what is happening to people just like us for meditating on a daily basis. And we're hoping that by displaying that on stage as part of our performance, and it's not the major part, we have about 20 pieces, you have probably a couple that talk about this, that can help give voice to the people in China who have no voice. More than that, the performance also, if you hear the dancers talk about it, and if you see the audience reviews that we had playing before, they're uplifting. In spite of all this, right? They're full of hope. They're inspiring. These are the words that people use when they talk about their experience seeing Shen Yun. They talk about finding an idea for a movie they're going to make in Hollywood, or a new design, or even some people say a purpose in life, just from seeing the show. Shen Yun is a very positive performance. We do talk about persecution, but it ends with a spirit of hope, of redemption, of faith. And that's an important message in our world today, we believe. We firmly believe. And it's important outside of China, it's important in China. Of course, we can't perform in China. That's the one place we officially cannot perform. But for the people in China, Shen Yun is a beacon of hope. We actually get regular emails on our website, when are you coming to China? We're in China, we're waiting for you. We had a guy in Vancouver who was sent to spy on us. And after the show, he found a security guard and said, you guys are doing a great job. I was sent here to spy on you by the PSB, but I'm on your side. We have people from China who will fly out regularly to Taiwan, to LA, to Vancouver to see our show, just to see our show. And finally, Shen Yun is really a huge American success story. Where is that in the media? Here you have a company of first-generation immigrants, came here legally, with talent, with a dream, with a lot of hard work, and built this company from nothing, without government funding, without corporate support, at a time when companies were going bankrupt. And in spite of the pandemic, in spite of financial recession, built it to the fastest-growing American performing arts company in history. So that's also being missed. So there's a lot more to this story, and I hope you can hear a lot of it from our panel here. I'm going to introduce the first speakers. Let me first introduce a concept of what is a practicum. So Lee Rubicek and his mom, Kay, is performing as what's called a student practicum. As part of his education with the Petition College. This is a program that's approved by New York State Board of Education, where they can perform with Shen Yun as part of their studies. They're not paid. All their expenses are paid. They're on full scholarship, as are all the students at Petition. And they have a reverse academic semester. So they're touring. They have some academic work they do on tour. Most of their academic work is done during the summer. So that's why he's a student performing tonight with Shen Yun. So without further ado, Kay and Lee, thank you.
Thank you. My name is Kay Rubicek. This is my son, Lee Rubicek. I'm a parent of 2 adult dance students who have toured with Shen Yun as part of their practicum study since 2019. In 2016, my son Lee began training in classical Chinese dance at his middle school in Orange County, New York. This training inspired him to audition for a scholarship at Petition Academy of the Arts with the hope of one day touring with Shen Yun, and he was able to achieve that in a few years. He's now a junior in Feitan College and enrolled in the practicum program with Shen Yun. So studying classical Chinese dance, culture and language is a challenge, but it was a great challenge. Physically, creatively, mentally, it has given him new ways to express himself, to tell stories, to communicate. It has gotten him off the computer that he had been hunched over before, like many teenage boys these days. And it not only gave him an amazing posture and physical self-awareness, but also newfound confidence, grit, self-discipline, and a healthy attitude toward life that will benefit him forever. What more could any parent hope for? Then, after having the chance to tour with Shen Yun and be mentored by some of the world's leading figures in this field, he's had an opportunity that most performing artists of any age can only dream of. And that is to take their art and to present it to willing audiences on the best stages of the world, like here tonight, Lincoln Center. My husband and I are often in amazement at the experience he has gained with Shen Yun and what he and his fellow artists have been able to achieve. I know from my own experience and from watching audience reviews that the impact Shen Yun has does not last just one night in the theatre. Shen Yun's message of hope touches people's hearts and souls. It inspires kindness and humanity, goodness and beauty. I regularly see people, audience members, with tears of joy or smiles of awe. And so many say that it has changed their lives for the better. And I read last year, Shen Yun had more than 1 million audience members. That's 1 million people who took home Shen Yun's positive message and put a touch of that positivity into their lives, their families, their relationships, their communities. So many people say they want to change the world and make the world a better place. But how many actually do it? How many have such a tangible, meaningful impact as Shen Yun does? I know I speak for many parents when I say that we are so proud that our kids not only want to make the world a better place, but they're actually willing to do it. They're willing to put in the effort and choose to work with such an outstanding organisation that actually makes it happen. But it's not easy for anyone to change the world, is it? Now, I want to speak on behalf of other parents and concerned community members. We have been horrified, truly, to see the gross distortions and false narratives about Shen Yun in mainstream media over the past year. It's really scary. As much as we know the serious safety concerns that Shen Yun takes with every tour, we cannot help but be concerned about their safety when we see Beijing's ability to manipulate and control our society like this. So in the wake of these public attacks against Shen Yun, the Shen Yun community of parents, students and staff created a petition in which we call upon relevant departments in the US government to protect American interests, companies and people from Beijing's control. We know that this is a case of attacking Shen Yun now, and if we don't address the problem now, other groups will be the next target. So today, this is the first time we are actually unveiling the results of this petition to the public. In this petition, we call for, 1, the Department of Justice to investigate sources of this foreign malign influence campaign and bring to justice those behind these attacks. 2, we call for Congress and the President to take action to protect American interests, companies and people from CCP malign influence operations. These actions need to be robust and savvy enough to effectively protect Americans while preserving our freedoms and liberty. And 3, we call upon the American media to act responsively, prioritizing transparency of sources with Beijing ties and true objectivity over the allure of attention-grabbing stories and the furthering of any ideological agenda. So with this petition, over 1,550 people signed this. 634 are current dancers, musicians and production staff, 142 former dancers and musicians, 791 family members, mostly parents just like me. Some of them added comments to the petition when they signed, which was optional, not required. And Lee will share some of those comments with you now and some of his experience in relation to them.
This is an excerpt from one of the comments written by a person who signed the petition. The revival of my heritage, the stability of my livelihood, and the freedom to believe in my spiritual faith in America. These are the things that I've always counted on the United States Constitution to protect. And yet, today, these are precisely the things that are at stake. Beginning with the CCP's attempts to sabotage the company that I am with, it is terrible to think that something like this could even take place on American soil. Before I joined Petition College, I thought it was impossible for the CCP to infiltrate the United States, and that all of us were under the protection of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. However, this all changed when I met a professor from Petition College who was beaten unconscious and had his house ransacked by CCP-hired thugs. The most shocking thing was that this happened on American soil. This is Dr. Peter Lee, after being brutally beaten by 3 thugs in his own home in Atlanta, Georgia. This showed me that even in the US, wherever you may be, even in the privacy and comfort of your own home, the CCP can attack you. And since these attacks have happened before, we know that the threats that we face today are very much real. This is another quote from a person that signed the petition. I was lucky to have escaped communist China, but now the same government is trying to exert control into America. Growing up in the West, I've been fortunate to be raised by 2 loving parents, something that I would have taken for granted. But after joining Petition College and joining the practicum program, I've come to know many fellow dancers and artists who have not been half as fortunate as me. One of my fellow dancers, Stephen Wang, was just a young boy when both of his parents were arrested and detained for practicing the Falun Dafa meditation in China. For years, Stephen and his sisters could never see both their parents together, because as soon as one of them was released, the other would be detained again. Later, Stephen finally got the opportunity to flee China and join Shen Yun, where he could use his talent in dance to tell his story and show the world the atrocities of the CCP, all in hope that one day his family would be freed. Soon after arriving in America, Stephen's dad did get fully released, but before Stephen could find out, his father passed away from the damage done to his body from a decade of maltreatment and torture by the authorities. Stephen never got the chance to see his dad before he died, and his mom is still suffering persecution there today. If Stephen tried to visit her in China, he would no doubt be immediately arrested, just like any of us would be. How crazy is it that we still can't perform classical Chinese dance and tell these true stories in China today? Stephen Wang is only one of many Shen Yun artists and staff members who have personally experienced the brutality of the CCP. Every day I'm honored to be surrounded by fellow artists who are using their artistic excellence to stand up to the CCP's malicious acts to save their friends and family. It takes a lot of courage for them to do that, knowing that they have family in China. I'm inspired by the courage I see in my fellow dancers and teachers who are able to push forward through any difficulty and dedicate themselves to Shen Yun's mission to revive traditional Chinese culture. This is the Shen Yun I have come to know and am proud to be a part of. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Allison Chen, and I'm a former dancer with Shen Yun Performing Arts. I performed with the company from 2007 to 2015 as a student performer on practicum. So I was a student at Fei Tian Academy of the Arts as well as Fei Tian College. And after I stopped performing with Shen Yun, I transitioned to a teaching position, and I've been teaching dance in upstate New York since 2016. My newest job is actually a mother to a newborn baby, so that's the hardest challenge I've been facing currently. As we've been listening to Kay and Lee share about the petition, this was something that I also signed as well back in August. I felt that a lot of the negative media attacks were pretty outrageous, and I mostly signed because my husband and my sister, they're also currently still touring with Shen Yun, so I'm also concerned for their safety as well. So every few days I do check up on their safety. My husband's currently performing in France, my sister's in Canada, and it really hits home when you think that potentially some danger could happen to them. And also, we mostly, my family does agree that this is not the Shen Yun that we know. So I think a lot of people don't realize that Shen Yun actually gives so many great opportunities to talented young people. And because I was given this opportunity to tour with the company from a young age, I built up a very, very strong work ethic. And I really learned that dedication pays off. I think a lot of people overlook that nowadays, and they only try to highlight and distort people's experiences at Shen Yun to pull it off as something negative, but we actually experienced way more positive things while performing with the company. So I came to Shen Yun back in the early days when the company just formed, back in 2007. So I came in 2007 when I was just a teenager, and this was something that I really wanted to do. My parents, they weren't sure if I could actually go dance professionally. They had their doubts, but I actually really, really wanted to come. So I convinced them to give me a chance to audition, and to their surprise, I made it. And that's when I joined Fei Tian Academy of the Arts as a dance student. And subsequently, because I was able to work on my skills, that I was given the opportunity to tour with the company. But I had to consistently keep that up, because if I wasn't good enough, I wouldn't be able to continue touring with the company on practicum. And also because of my doubtful parents, I was a bit of a rebel. I tried to prove them wrong, because they would actually call me every few months or so, and they would ask me, do you want to come home? How about you come home to California? You can go study hard and go apply for Stanford, apply for one of the UCs. But that really wasn't my calling. I didn't want to do that. I really wanted to live the life and experience the life of a professional dancer if I could. So I kept pushing through. That's why I worked really, really hard on my dancing skills, and they were very surprised that I actually continued to study in Fei Tian College as a dancer. And eventually I even got my master's degree in dance. So all of that was because I saw how my classmates were all working really hard. I saw the professional dancers and their dedication to the craft. And that's really what pushed me forward. And I wanted to be a part of that as well. So needless to say, I think the company culture of Shen Yun has really influenced my work ethic and my personality today. So even starting from a young age, we started to build a very strong sense of responsibility. When we were touring with the company, we always were taught to be on time. We were always told to do our best if we could. And after every show, we would actually summarize how every performance went, so that we could be accountable for our mistakes, not to belittle us, but actually so that we could do better for the next performance. And because we were in this group environment, we worked as a team. So we were always practicing how to communicate with each other and how to solve problems. And I think for a teenager, back when I was a teenager, I was able to put that into practice versus just hearing the theory behind this. So we got to do this on a daily basis. And above all, I think being a part of the company, we really learned not to back down when faced with challenges. So after being with Shen Yun for 8 years, I think that's something, that mentality and that work ethic has really stuck with me. After I transitioned to become a teacher in 2016, I think that's something that I've really kept with me. So I transitioned from being a dance teacher to a professor, and now I'm currently the chair of the dance department at Fei Tian College at Middletown, a branch campus of Fei Tian College. So even though the environment has changed for me, I've kept that mentality this whole time, and because that's how I was brought up. So it's very natural for me to, keep that. And now, even now, with my new role as a mother, there are actually a lot of challenges that I face every single day. I would argue this is probably the hardest job that I've ever done. But I learned actually from Shen Yun that if you persevere, good things will come as long as you keep going. So I'm sure many of my fellow artists, fellow dancers and musicians, they also feel the same way. A lot of them, when I see them on stage now, I'm pretty sure a lot of them work harder than I did back when I was young. So we do what we do because we really love our craft. We love our work. We love what we do. And I think that's the real spirit behind all the Shen Yun dancers and musicians. That's what drives us. And that's why we're willing to push ourselves through all these different challenges. So that's just a little bit of my experience. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Peter Huang, and I'm currently a principal dancer with Shen Performing Arts. I'm not a greatest speaker, so please bear with me. So for me as an artist, to see the picture that some of the media has painted Shen Yun, the accusations that we have a toxic work environment or that our training is abusive, to me personally that's straight. They're just insulting, One of the things that I've learned from Shen Yun is the pursuit of excellence. I believe that in order to achieve excellence, no matter what field, sacrifices need to be made. And in the end, if you want to choose to go through with it, that's completely up to you. And in Shen Yun, that's exactly the same. Many people talk about the work ethic of the Navy SEALs or the Olympic athletes. And nobody says that their training is abusive. Actually 2 months ago, we were performing in Rome, and we had a chance to visit the Sistine Chapel. And I learned then that Michelangelo, he spent years, often in the dark, painting that ceiling. And after he was done, he developed problems to his eyes, his neck, and his back. And that truly inspired me because I think he was willing to sacrifice all that. He chose that path, and even to this day his works of art inspire and uplift millions of people around the world, and that to me is an inspiration. Our training, the training in Shen Yun, is not comparable to what I just said, like the Navy SEALs or the Olympic athletes, but it is tough. It is both demanding physically and mentally, and I understand that it is not for everyone. And but this is the path that we chose, and we're okay with it. And granted, along the way there'll be some injuries, like Lee has gone through. And actually last year I started feeling pain in my Achilles, and I grew up a Kobe Bryant fan, so I really wanted to tough it out, But in the end, when my company manager found out, she said that I should rest, that to view my career as a marathon and not a sprint. And I really appreciate that. And I still think back to when Kobe Bryant tore his Achilles. He walked off the court by himself, walked back on, made 2 free throws, and then walked off again. And then that mentality, that dedication, it still inspires me to this day. But I also understand that as a performer, we all have a responsibility to our audience. For me to perform while injured, that would be very irresponsible because we want to bring what's, our best to the audience. And the accusations that Shen Yun is forcing his performers to perform while injured, I think that's just not true. Because if you think logically, which performing arts company could thrive if it was forcing its performers to perform while injured? That just doesn't make sense. And then, the success that Shen has had over the years, we've grown from 1 company to 8 companies, and the positive reviews that we've received all over the world is a testament to what Shen is doing, that Shen is on the right path. Actually, one of the most important lessons that I've learned was from my academic teacher, who's actually sitting right there. I remember he taught us that the purpose of art throughout the ages is not to entertain, it's more to educate, uplift, and to glorify the divine. And I truly believe that what Shen is doing today is just that, to uplift people and bring them closer to the gods. And today when I see Shen being attacked from all directions, from the Western media, it really saddens me, and I hope that we can all change that narrative. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Rachel Chen, and I'm a principal violist with Shen Yun Performing Arts. After being with Shen Yun for almost 14 years, I often get asked why I wanted to join Shen Yun and why I stayed with the company for so many years. Of course, there was the allure of traveling the world on practicum, performing in top venues, and achieving what many professional musicians would call the pinnacle of their career before I even graduated from college. But today, I want to share how much I've grown personally and spiritually from my experience at Shen Yun. I grew up in a mostly Caucasian city in the suburbs of Chicago as a second-generation Chinese American, so I rarely came in contact with my heritage. I remember I was actually quite embarrassed to be Chinese when I was younger, and I told my grandparents every time my friends would come over, don't cook Chinese food, don't speak Chinese, they're going to think I'm weird or strange. I just really wanted to be American. And then I watched Shen Yun. And to see my culture so beautifully expressed on stage, from the music to the stories, it gave me a sense of pride. It made me feel like Chinese culture wasn't just about eating dumplings on Chinese New Year. It depicted China as a place with 5,000 years of glorious history. When I heard that Shen Yun was filled with the people just like me who shared the same faith, joining Shen Yun became my new dream. After coming to Feitian and Shen Yun, I found myself surrounded by traditional culture. The tales from ancient China that we learned in class always had an important moral lesson, and these stories of courage and loyalty helped shape my character and dispelled my previous rejection of my heritage, replacing it with deep appreciation. But the most important reason why joining Shen Yun has changed me for the better is because of my spiritual practice, Falun Dafa. The community at Shen Yun is built on the basis of faith. Everyone is not only striving for excellence, but also leading their lives by the principles of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. In this environment, I feel encouraged to become a better person. But as I am perfecting my craft and working on my character, sometimes it's easy to overlook the fact that people in China who share the same faith as me are being persecuted. Growing up in the West, the persecution always felt a bit distant because nothing actually happened to me personally. But a few years back, during a show in Holland, it was intermission, and a Chinese lady came up to the pit. And I don't remember exactly what the acknowledgement was, but she acknowledged our erhu player at the time. And in that look, there was a lot of understanding, and there was a lot of meaning in the acknowledgement they shared. So out of curiosity, I asked her who the lady was. And she responded, "We were in the same labor camp together." In that moment, the weight of our mission felt very real. We weren't just here to entertain. We have a mission of reviving Chinese culture and sharing the stories of practitioners in China whose voices cannot be heard. For someone who feels strongly about this mission, I was deeply hurt when I heard about the bomb threats towards our company. As a performing arts group, our mission to revive traditional Chinese culture and raise awareness about the persecution of Falun Dafa came from a place of faith and compassion. To see people go as far as endangering the well-being of our community, our families, and even our audience members is egregious. It gives me more motivation to give the best to our audience members, even when we're being attacked in the most hurtful way. I joined Shen Yun to connect with my roots, but I stayed because Shen Yun changed me for the better and has given my life purpose. For me, Shen Yun is not just a show or a workplace. Shen Yun is my home. Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. My name is Levi Browdy. I'm the Executive Director of the Falun Dafa Information Center. We're a human rights organization, all-volunteer organization, dedicated to the human rights of Falun Gong practitioners in China, and we're reporting on that for 25 years. And more recently, really being focused on transnational repression. And as you heard today from what these people were talking about, a core component of the transnational repression of the Chinese regime against Falun Gong increasingly has become to sabotage, to cancel, to destroy Shen Yun, the company. I'd like to underscore a couple things on the broader issue here, because what's really at play goes way beyond the Falun Gong diaspora, the community. It goes way beyond this one company, Shen Yun. This is a national security issue of, I would say, the gravest kind. I want to share a couple quotes from you, for you here. One is from U.S. Attorney Damian Williams, and this is, he said this from the Southern District of New York. He said this shortly after arresting the two gentlemen that Li Shai had referenced that had tried to bribe their IRS to go after Shen Yun. And he said, efforts to manipulate and use the arms of the U.S. government to carry out the PRC government's autocratic aims are as shocking as they are insidious. Another quote. This is from U.S. Brigadier General Robert Spalding, testifying before our Congress last year, where he said the CCP uses our own media against us. And one good example of this is the attack on Falun Gong. And he goes on to talk about how they've basically convinced our media, our university institutions, that Falun Gong is weird or strange or the somehow strange group. And they're controlling the narratives here in the United States. Li Shai talked about the campaign the CCP has engaged against Shen Yun has been going on for 18 years. We did a report on this and documented at that time 130 incidents across 38 countries where primarily Chinese diplomats, sometimes the ambassador, him or herself, in the country going to threaten the theater, threaten the local government. In the Dominican Republic, they even chased down the president of the country, trying to put pressure on these countries to not have Shen Yun perform. And the range of tactics has gone from threatening theaters and government officials to disinformation, sabotaging vehicles, imprisoning family members and threatening family members that are inside China. So this has been going on for 18 years. And as Li Shai mentioned, over the last year, there's been a tremendous escalation. Where has that come from? The very highest levels of the Chinese regime. We have multiple sources, including a well-known professor in Australia, several other sources within the Ministry of Public Security that say this came from Xi Jinping himself, who acknowledged that all the efforts they've been undertaking over the last 25 years to silence Falun Gong and Shen Yun have failed. And they needed to get very serious about eliminating Falun Gong globally. Their words, not mine. And so that's what we've been seeing. And they laid out a strategy. They said, we're going to establish a beachhead in social media, in YouTube influencers, things of that nature, with narratives that will work in the United States, with things that make people angry, such as abuse of young people. This is not something they ever talk about with Falun Gong or Shen Yun inside China, but they find the narratives in this country, seed that information in influencers, and then try and bait the mainstream media, and in so doing drive a wedge between Shen Yun and Falun Gong and the U.S. government and American people. And so this is what they've been saying in these meetings with the Ministry of Public Security. Lo and behold, over the last year and a half, that's exactly what we've seen. And that's what's behind everything that they've been talking about today in this campaign to go after Shen Yun. So, as I mentioned, this is really not just about the Falun Gong community or Shen Yun. This is a playbook. This is the ability for the Chinese regime to weaponize American institutions against America. And if they succeed at doing this against Shen Yun, against the Falun Gong community, it will not stop there. The persecution of Falun Gong never stops at Falun Gong. They were doing forced organ harvesting on Falun Gong for many years, and suddenly they start doing it on Uyghurs and other groups. John Chen, the man that was arrested for bribing the IRS, guess what else he was doing? He was coordinating other spies in California to interfere with our elections. If they succeed in implementing this playbook to try and sabotage or cancel Shen Yun, this is a playbook they can repeat against any person or organization in America or around the world. And so, while these stories are very close to us inside this Falun Gong community and the Shen Yun community, they are a national security issue. And this is what we need to start talking about, is this not just a victimization of a group of people. This is a weaponization of our institutions against ourselves. And that's what we need Congress to step up with, our government agencies to step up with. And as Kay had mentioned, while protecting the civil liberties, while protecting our freedoms in this country, find a way to protect Americans and American companies from Beijing. That's really what this story is about. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Before we open up to questions, I want to thank especially the performers who have a show tonight. Setup days, for those in the performing arts world know, is very stressful. There's a lot going on. It's a very hectic schedule. But we appreciate your time. We know it's a very important conversation. The artists that are here today, the ones that you'll see performing with such joy, they're among the best in the world at what they do. And their dedication, as you heard, comes from a sense of purpose. Performing to save a lost culture, a world treasure from the brink of extinction, performing to speak up for those who have no voice in China, and performing to bring a message of hope and courage and faith. Our calls to action from the petition, to reiterate, we are asking for the Department of Justice to investigate the sources of the foreign malign influence, the transnational repression, including the bomb threats, including the weaponization of social media and trying to influence mainstream media and the government with lawfare. Second, asking Congress and the President to take action to protect American people, interests, and companies and freedoms from the CCP's influence here in America, and for the American media to act responsibly with transparency and integrity when covering these issues and other issues in China. So thank you again for being here. We'll now open for questions for me or for the panel. You guys have a microphone? Do you have a microphone? Perhaps we can, yep. Oh, okay, perfect. We have a microphone up here. Town hall style.
You can take it off.
Yeah, we can just give it to them. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And just, if you're addressing it to somebody in particular, please mention who that is.
I'm Peter Schwab with the Epoch Times. I was just wondering, I've noticed recently, and some Shen Yun people have mentioned Shen Yun go into China, or even like, that's a plan. So what gives you the confidence that Shen Yun would ever be allowed to perform in China, or not to mention it like...
Who's on the record saying that?
All of us.
It's a dream. it's been a dream since day one for all of us. I'll just answer that real quick, but then I actually want to hear what the Chinese people have to say. It's part of what keeps me going. Sometimes when, it's a long tour, the thought of going and performing and bringing this culture, witnessing that historic moment. We did almost perform in Hong Kong. We had 7 sold-out shows in Hong Kong. I was in a company that was going to go there. We had a rehearsal, and it was an amalgamation of previous years, like the best of, because we have a new show every year, it was the best of all the former performances up to that point. And we had a dress rehearsal, and some of the dancers had their bags packed. But right on stage during a debrief, still in costume and sweating, we were told that the shows were canceled because we didn't get visas. So that's as close as we got. That was a good 15 years ago now. What do you guys think about performing in China?
I'm not Chinese, but can I say something?
Just this once.
One thing that many people don't know about Falun Gong is that over the last 20 years, they and supporters inside China have constituted the largest civil disobedience movement in world history, as far as I know. Tens of millions in China, again, this is at least going on for 20 years, engage in activities predominantly like running an underground print shop. They make leaflets and pamphlets like they used to do in the 18th century here, and in the back rooms of their apartments or in the basement, and under cover of night, sending those out, distributing those in their local village, their town, their high-rise building. This is going on for years, and that's had a tremendous effect on the understanding of the Chinese people, because, again, they're growing up under state-run media. They're not necessarily getting any of this stuff, not just stuff inside China, but also outside China. And there's been a tremendous awakening. We've heard anecdote after anecdote after anecdote of local areas, local policemen who've received these kind of pamphlets and said, you know what, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not going to persecute Falun Gong anymore. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that. The persecution remains very severe overall, but there's so many of these pockets and so many of these stories. This persecution can't stand forever when that amount of people are starting to understand what's really going on in Falun Gong and also the true history of the CCP. And so I think it's only a matter of time till that hits a certain threshold where enough is enough. This persecution can't go on for much longer. And I think once the persecution ends, not only could Shen Yun go into China, but it will be celebrated immensely as something of tremendous pride. I think as Li Shai or someone was talking about, even today people come out of China when they can and go see Shen Yun in Taiwan or local areas near China because they see this is the real China. This is real Chinese culture. And I think it will be a very proud and happy day, and it's not too far off before Shen Yun will be embraced and welcomed into China.
Thanks.
Peter, Rachel, Allison? Anything to add? All right, maybe later. Next question, please.
Hi, I'm Lisa Zarelli with the America First podcast, and I congratulate you all on your perseverance. And I wish to say that I've been in education for 30 years, and we have seen in the past 5 years predominantly, especially in New York, an infiltration of the very things you speak of. There is a Chinese association affiliated with Brooklyn College who funded a large majority of the 2021 New York State guidance, in which the children are taught on page 7 to be activists, social activists. And the majority of the guidance details how horrible America is. So in relation to that, and the examples that you have provided, we know as well that there was a police-like organization right in Manhattan with the Chinese Communist Party. They are situated there to seek out Chinese Americans and harass them. What can we do with your petition through the school systems, if we may, to promote Shen Yun and to further educate on what the Communist Party is doing here in New York alone?
That's a great question. Yeah, the police stations, I think there was over 100 of them discovered nationwide. 140, maybe somebody here has the exact number. Well, I think there's a lot of room for cooperation. First of all, I think Allison Chen there is at a school that does collaboration. It's an affiliate of the Petition College system, which where many of the Shen Yun's dancers and musicians have been trained, and they actually do collaboration activities with other schools, as far as I know. So that's one thing you can speak about that. Certainly, we can look into an opportunity for schools to bring their students and their teachers to see traditional culture, not as portrayed by Confucius Institutes and Chinese Student and Scholar Associations and all these other programs. And we could certainly make some connections with that as well. Yeah. Allison?
Well, first of all, because I'm not currently with the company anymore, so I can't really speak on behalf of Shen Yun. But yeah, again, if there are collaboration opportunities, we're open to discussing and seeing how to make that possible to students. Currently, because I'm just at a branch campus of Petition College, we're mostly working to help people see what Chinese culture and dance is about, just establish a basic understanding about the beauty and the grace of this art form. So it's we have been doing quite a bit of outreach opportunities with other organizations. So that's something we could talk about later. Yeah.
I'd like to add, I think it's really inspiring to hear that a lot of people, a lot more people are aware of what's going on with the transnational repression now, but it's really that the discussions are just starting and that more discussions need to happen from here. And I feel like this press conference is part of that. It's starting a discussion, and things need to happen with different organizations saying, oh, I can relate to that. I've seen that in my community. Let's talk about it. Let's do things. Let's make something happen. And I think that there's a lot of things that can happen from here, and this is a starting point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This question may be directed to Levi or Lishai. When it comes to the weaponization of our institutions, there seems to be a lot of moving pieces, and it seems very complicated. If you could sort of elaborate on this, and also the calls that we heard from the petition, Kay, announcing the petition, the calls for the Department of Justice to look into it, what would they be looking for exactly?
And again, I recognize this is a challenge because, my father was a professor of constitutional law. There was a lot of discussion about the framers around our dinner table growing up. This is a great country for the freedoms it has, the civil liberties, and whatever solution we come up with needs to maintain that. We're not giving that up. However, we have a threat that the framers could never even conceived of in a million years. And I think we need to look at the implements for strengthening that. And the first place to start, perhaps, aside from what the petition is calling for, to have these institutions, Congress, Department of Homeland Security, DOJ looking at this, look at the weapons that we have right now, for example, the FARA regulations. Now, are those strong enough? Those were formulated many years ago. Are they strong enough so that we can identify someone who's truly working as a foreign agent and somehow operating a foreign malign influence operation here? Not nearly strong enough. And now we have so many examples of Chinese spies and espionage and everything that these guys have been talking about to recognize that's not strong enough. So we need legal mechanisms that at first at least requires transparency, so we know when an individual organization truly is working on behalf of Beijing, and then going the next step to be able to strengthen our ability legislatively in terms of the executive branch to take action on that. It's very weak, and it's decades behind the threat that Beijing actually poses.
Go ahead. To your right.
Yeah, so this is Felishai. I'm Alan Zing with the Sound of Hope radio. And with the spiked activity of interference, and also with the, 10 article reporting by the New York Times, has that, how has that impacted Shen Yun attendance negatively, if you notice?
I have anecdotal evidence that in some parts of the country it has affected attendance. We'll see what it's like here in New York. Traditionally, we're used to the theaters being completely full. It's certainly not in the beginning when we first started. We definitely had growing pains there, and we had some performances that were not well attended at all. But that was way, way back. And then for years it was full. You know, in the beginning, say, we have a full house today. Then after a while, we stopped even saying that. There was no point. It was always a full house. We didn't even ask how ticket sales are. This year is a little different. Now, there's a lot of factors. There's the economy. There's other things going on. So I can't say for sure. But we did have a few people, anecdotally, who did call in to say they're not going to support us because of the stuff that they read. We've had a few people cancel because of bomb threats. Say, did we support you, but we understand that these are fake bomb threats. They're scare tactics, but we still are going to keep our distance. So what that number is, I don't know. But I can tell you just from the eyeball test, I do honestly feel like it has affected ticket sales somewhat. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just wondering, since the recent changes, that as Lisha you mentioned, how this threat to Shen Yun happened, what kind of responses you have been getting from the audience or from the general public in the United States to prompt you to have responses like, including this press conference, making you feel so important to do this?
This is fairly subjective. It's an experience. When you're on stage as a dancer or as an MC, you can kind of feel the audience a little bit. You kind of have a sense for how a joke is going to land and how they're reacting to things. We had, I remember early on in tour, a performance in San Antonio where we got a bomb threat. And the next day, it wasn't super well attended. I don't know how much of the word got out or what, but it felt like the audience that was there was really with us. They came in spite of the threat, in spite of the coverage, and they were on our side. It was just the support that we got from them it was unbelievable in terms of just the vibe, the energy in the room. I know that's not something very scientific, but for me personally, that's one thing that I felt. And I remember talking to people after the show. It felt like this audience was different, and we felt that other times during tour as well. Be curious to hear what other people have to say. But I'll just say we do want to really thank the theaters and the law enforcement wherever we've gone. At the Kennedy Center, for example, the Park Police, Capitol Police, they were amazing. Kept everybody in order and everybody calm, and they did their thing, and they stood out there in the cold with us, and they have their sniff dogs and everything. Even though we know these are pranks, these are attempts to scare everybody, we still take the audience's safety very, very seriously. As is a theater, they have their protocols, and so we've had the canines, we've seen a lot of dogs this tour. They do their thing. They've had metal detectors in some cases, and we really appreciate that. And we appreciate the theaters for not, freaking out, because this is very unusual, I think, for a performing arts company to get a bomb threat like that on the morning of a show, which is often when they come in. So we really thank them. But I'm curious if you guys have had any feeling of the audience's reaction and how much they've been impacted. I actually asked one of the principal dancers in my group. My group was just in Chicago yesterday, Angela Lynn. I asked her what she felt about this. She said she found it completely ridiculous because the only other times I've heard of bomb threats are from terrorist groups like ISIS. To send a bomb threat to a performing arts company is completely outrageous, especially on American soil. But for us artists with a mission to stop this persecution, and for those artists whose lives are directly affected because of this persecution, we won't be stopped. That was her quote about the bomb threats.
Well, again, it's me. My question is this. There's two ways to handle this issue. Because you are a performing company, right? You want to success of your performance. One way is to just downplay this, just hide it. Another way is what do? You go right up front to this. What's your decision process? And what's your thinking process? Why do you take this approach?
Well, I can only speak for myself. I can't really represent the entire company policy here. when it first started, I think we were mostly concerned about making sure the theaters understand what's going on in the context of everything and not scaring the audience, because there was no reason to be afraid. The theaters were checked. We knew that these were routine scare tactics that we're getting, and so we didn't really make a big deal of it. But when we're at the Kennedy Center, and the entire complex of 6 buildings was evacuated, multiple performing arts companies, and the media was there and with their cameras, and the first reporter I talked to was just standing there grabbing some guy with a cello who happened to walk by saying, "What's going on?" And the guy said, "I don't know, I'm going to get coffee." So I said, "Okay, let me tell you what's going on." And the time came for people to know what we're facing. And we are facing a large-scale battle that, as Levi said, is part of a much bigger context that Americans and the rest of the free world is facing right now. We're on the front line of it, sometimes center stage, sometimes at a press conference, and we feel like it's a good opportunity, it's a good time for Americans to know about this, to understand what's going on, and we really appreciate the support of the people who know what's going on and still come and see the show. Kennedy Center, it happened the first day. We were there for 12 more shows after that, and the audience attendance was pretty good. A lot of people, thousands of people still came, in spite of it being all over the news. Yeah.
I just kind of want to add on to this. It's a little bit of a tangent because I'm currently not touring with the company, but I've been thinking about it, how the bomb threats and all the CCP threats have been affecting us negatively. And it really is a threat to us as Americans, because I grew up here in America. I was born and raised here. I've never been to China. And when I was growing up, we've always been told, oh, here we're free. You know, you're free to believe, you're free to speak what you feel. You have that freedom to, practice any religion that you want. And even with the persecution happening, I never really related to it because I had so much freedom here. I didn't face any physical harm or any safety concerns until later on when I started performing with Shen Yun, and then that's when I started having a little bit of more of a sense of I need to protect myself, I need to keep my friends safe. But now I feel like a lot of our American values are being endangered. And it's on a physical level, yeah, there are those safety concerns with the bomb threats, but also from a psychological level and a spiritual level, a lot of our American values are being threatened just from this CCP infiltration. I would say, even for myself, I'm not performing with the company, but a lot of people try to disassociate themselves with me now. They don't want to communicate with me, or they don't want to collaborate with me sometimes purely just because they know I practice Falun Gong, or because they know I used to dance with Shen Yun. Where I work now at Feitian College at Middletown, we're not a religious school, and we have students who don't practice Falun Gong who come in to study with us. But even so, a lot of people just label me as part of this Falun Gong sort of cult, sort of this religion, and I get discriminated sometimes. A lot of times people just won't want to connect with us simply because they hear all these lies and rumors that the CCP has spread. So I think that's another angle to look at it, and to be aware of that really we're being attacked on multiple levels, I think.
Okay. Last question. So, have you considered that any countermeasure to bring the lawsuit to New York Times, and also with the DOJ? Have you filed a petition? What's their response thus far?
I don't know if any of the other panelists are aware of anything. I'm not aware of something like that at the moment.
We're looking at all options, and again, the first priority is to make this community safe. The second priority is to make sure this country is safe, and so whoever lawyers we need to talk to, government agencies, we're engaging to make sure that happens. Yeah.
And with regard to the petition, today was the first time that we've actually unveiled it, and so it's ready to take the next steps, which are to happen. So, but today is actually the first announcement of the results.
Let's pass on the mic. We can come back to you if you want.
Thank you, everyone, to create this event to raise the awareness of CCP's threats. Lisha just mentioned Shen Yun got more than 30 bomb threats in this tour and more threats for the Shen Yun campus. There are lots of teenagers in Shen Yun campus. How they react as a Falun Dafa practitioner, and does they harm to the teens? Like, how do they, like, performers, like, if there has any, like, harms in the heart, like trauma or something like that? Thank you.
My son is here. He's in his early 20s, and my daughter is 18, touring with Shen Yun. And everyone has a different personality, right? So when I asked them immediately, what do you think? What's your reaction? And my daughter said, I'm devastated. How could they think this about us? This is horrible. She was very upset. And then I asked my son, and he's like, why should I care what other people think? I'm doing the right thing. Everyone's different, and I don't remember the exact number of teenagers, but there's not that many teenagers. The New York Times makes it look like there's a lot, but there's not. Majority are professionals or college students who are not minors. So I don't have the exact numbers there.
I can give that real quick before we continue. On average, in our performing arts companies, 85% of touring members are adults. And then the remaining spots are for students on practicum who have earned the right to be there as part of the company. That's very different from what's being depicted in the media. But we do have young students who are, in their teen years training. Peter, you've taught some of them, right? How are people taking this on campus?
So I can only speak for myself personally. I think whenever we get these bomb threats, we're not actually scared, because that proves that the CCP is scared of us. That's why they're trying to stop us. But on the other hand, I think it's very unfair to the audience members, because they had nothing to do with this, and then all we're trying to do is to put on a good show and make the audience happy. And then whenever we hear about these bomb threats, we just think that's just so unfair. But for us, I think it will not stop us, it will not deter us, and then we'll just keep pushing forward.
We have had to up our security measures in terms of just practically speaking, but we had to start doing that a few years ago when we started having the tires on our buses slashed. I got a picture of that here. So this happened for the first time in Canada. It happened again in Costa Mesa. This is Costa Mesa, California, last March. You see there's a cut here in a crescent shape. Same exact cut on multiple other vehicles. When it was brought to the garage, the mechanic said, this is really interesting, because this cut was done with a knife. It's very deep, but it was done in such a way that the tire would not deflate, but would only explode at high speeds on the highway. And it was done on the front tire of the bus, which would lead to easily losing control of the vehicle at 60, 70 miles an hour with 30, 40 people on board. So since we started discovering these, and we have our pre-trip inspections and all that stuff, we have 24-hour security on our vehicles. In spite of that, we still had 2 incidents, one more just a couple weeks ago in California again, where when the bus was in a garage, somebody went and either did a cut, in this case in Costa Mesa, or put a screw inside the inner tube without a screw coming in from the outside. So that's in spite of us having security all the time. On our campus, a couple hours from here, we have security. We have security at our gates. That's one of the reasons why you can't just go there on a tour right now, but we do hope to be able to do that in the future. So we do have security. We have security when we tour. We have security in the theater. And we're working with the theaters and law enforcement to make sure everybody's safe in our performances. So it is a concern from that perspective. But as Peter said, that's the reaction I get from all the dancers. They're like, yeah, but it's not a real threat. We're going to focus on our art. And they're very good at what they do, and they're very dedicated, as you heard. And that's where their focus is. Yeah, please.
Yeah. Just as Levi was saying, most of us students, speaking from my perspective, we just want to go to school, get a good education, and be the best artist that we can. It's like, what have we done to deserve these bomb threats, these death threats? It doesn't really make sense.
And actually, from the perspective of an educator, I think it's also really unfair to the students because, like what Lee said, they're really just trying to work hard and perfect their craft and learn as much as they can. But these bomb threats, it's almost like a distraction and a deterrent that pulls them away from focusing on trying to learn. I'm pretty sure most performing arts companies in America are not faced with this challenge, and that's something that we have to deal with, or us as Shen Yun Performing Arts, they have to deal with almost on a daily basis. They always have to be constantly aware of their safety, and these students, they have to put up with extra, another burden to when they hear about these things. I know they kind of brush it off and say, oh, it's not really a big deal, but what if something actually is going to happen? So I think that's another question that we need to pose, and that's why we do take security pretty seriously.
Look, as a parent, I'm a mother of 2 kids, right? You see that slice on a tire? What's going to happen on a bus driving 65 miles an hour? That's not a threat. Look, to me, I say that's attempted murder. That's completely unacceptable. For that to happen once is bad enough. Again and again? No, it's not. It's not acceptable. So, I think it's a fantastic, the artists are focused and dedicated, and I admire that. But, I'm a parent sitting at home going, okay, there's another bomb threat. Okay, I know it's a threat. But when you see the tires slashing like that, that is completely unacceptable. That is not a threat. That's attempted murder there on a bus. Not just the people in the bus, but what would happen to all the vehicles on the highway? Seriously, this is much more beyond threats. It is completely unacceptable. That's what I want to say.
Okay. It is now 3:30, and I'm afraid that I promised Peter, Rachel, and Lee that they'll be back. You hear some of the rehearsal already in the background. They have spacing and a performance to get ready for. However, a few of us will stay behind if you have in-person questions that you want to continue asking. Thank you very much for your time.